Tonight, historic levels of inflation, the highest consumer price index in 40 years, prices at their highest point since the previous month's record-shattering highs.
And
we may follow his wisdom, I hope, and his timeless truth.
The nation remembers Bob Dole.
Plus, a military vaccine mandate.
It goes against my bodily sovereignty as a Christian.
The religious exemptions some service members are employing to skirt the requirement.
It's not about liberties. It's about a military medical requirement.
All this and more.
Tonight on Faith Nation.
Skyrocketing, record-setting inflation sets in once again. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup.
And I'm Jenna Browder. Inflation now reaching a new 40-year high. More on that. But first to the Supreme Court, where a two-part decision was handed down today. The Texas abortion law, which bans abortion in that state after 6 weeks, will stay in place. And at the same time, abortion providers can challenge the law. The Texas heartbeat law bans abortion once a heartbeat is detected, which often is before many women know they're pregnant. It also puts enforcement on citizens who can sue anyone who aids in an abortion.
Joining us now is Kimberly Schwartz with Texas Right to Life. She's the Director of Media and Communications there. Kimberly, thank you so much for joining us. Your take here, is the Supreme Court trying to play both sides with this decision? Kimberly, can you hear us?
Or the pro-life movement, that we have the dismissal of the Biden administration's.
Looks like her video is freezing up. We'll just try to get her back here in a moment. The price of the American dream feels like it's getting out of reach, thanks in large part to November's highest consumer price index reading since 1982.
The cost of almost everything going up. Analysts say it might be time to reorganize your family budget. CBN's Brody Carter is following the numbers and joins us now from the newsroom. Brody?
John, Jenna, economists were not wrong last month when they said the worst was yet to come. U.S. consumer prices soared 6.8% this year, and it likely won't get better anytime soon.
The overwhelming consensus is going to pop up a little bit and then go back down.
Instead of going down like the president's rosy forecast in June, U.S. prices rose 6.8% over last November to a 39-year high.
Many Americans are seeing their standard of living actually decline year over year.
Economists say the middle class is suffering the most. The Dollar Tree announced it's hiking prices on most products to $1.25. Even a New York slice of pizza jumped from $1 to $1.50. The biggest pain points for Americans, keeping the heat and lights on, while also filling up the gas tank. In 12 months, the cost of food at the grocery stores, gas at the pump, new and used vehicles, and rent and housing have all gone up due to supply chain snarls and fallout from the pandemic. And the list is only growing. The White House acknowledged damage done from inflation, although Democrats promise the Build Back Better agenda will actually fix the situation. Some economists beg to differ.
The most important thing to do is stop this bill. Trillions of dollars of more spending is going to make inflation worse, and it's going to put our country in great financial peril.
It's unclear when inflationary pressures will ease closer to the Fed's 2% annual target. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell suggested ditching the term transitory altogether when referring to inflation, indicating these price hikes are here to stay. Numbers on Wall Street seem to like the inflation report. The S&P 500 on track for its best week since February. But it still doesn't put change in the pockets of hardworking Americans. John, Jenna, back to you.
All right, Brody Carter in the newsroom, thank you. And here with us now is Dan Celia, President and CEO at Financial Issues Stewardship Ministries. Dan, welcome. Good to see you. So the highest inflation we've seen since 1982. President Biden said today this is the peak and that we'll see change sooner than some predict. What do you think?
Well, it's not even close to the peak. It's going to go up. I hate to bring that bad news, Jenna, but you know, back in February, I said there's no possible way that we can have transitory inflation. Because what we're seeing is causing most of this is wages. Wages are increasing dramatically. We see that across the board, but yet we're not seeing job openings getting filled. We are continuing to see bottlenecks. But look, this is a function of no fiscal policy, government failed policy, and the Federal Reserve once again leading from behind. They had a chance in January to begin leading out in front, and they decided not to because they believed this was going to be transitory or temporary, as they said, which was an impossibility then. Why that notion ever came about, I'm not sure. But nobody's going to have their wages taken away from them. Wages up over 9.7%.
Democrats, Dan, they say passing the rest of the Build Back Better plan focused on social spending and what they're calling human infrastructure will help fix inflation. Most Republicans counter, though, that more money into the system is going to make the problem worse. Dan, who's right here?
Well, more money in the system is going to make the problem worse. There's no doubt about it. We cannot continue to print money, spend money without having any productive spending. I would consider infrastructure somewhat productive spending, far too much. We needed about $600 billion. So that means a lot of this money is getting spent on things that are going to create more inflation, larger government, ballooning government, bigger government, more spending. We don't have the means to keep that up. And we don't have anybody buying our debt with the exception of the Federal Reserve. I made a prediction that has to be true, that the Federal Reserve will continue to buy our debt. They may not say they are, but they have to, because we are printing far more debt than we have buyers to buy it. And we need buyers to come in to buy our debt in order to monetize it. And this is a huge, huge problem. And frankly, the administration is talking about going back and building an economy. It is literally impossible to build or go back to what we had. It is impossible. We'll never go back there without a dramatic change in the administrative, fiscal policy, government policy. And until that happens, we have no chance of that. And I believe everybody knows that. I'm just not so sure why they're so unwilling to do anything about it.
Yeah, Dan, high prices across the board and really every segment of the economy. For families at home, what should they be doing to help cope with this lasting inflation?
You know, Jenna, it's a great question. It's a very difficult one to answer, but I would say this. They really need to be focused on their debt, number one, make sure that they can stay out of debt. Many are out, but they need to stay out of debt. And they need to really change their habits. And we're going to see that across the board, which, by the way, is going to be a negative for the economy. But we need to change our buying and our spending. And, you know, if we were buying store brand Cheerios, we're going to be, name brand Cheerios, we're going to buy store brand Cheerios. We're going from beef to chicken. Chicken's getting priced out. So, you know, those kinds of spending habits will change dramatically. But if gasoline prices, which I expect them to go up this week or the end of the week, this weekend, they're likely to go up. And if gas prices get back, we have oil over $72 a barrel again. It's just coming directly out of consumers' pockets. All of this, consumers digging in. The government believes because wages are going up, that it's going to counterbalance the price going up. It is not even close to that. That is not going to happen. Certainly it helps, but we have an awful lot of people that aren't getting any kind of appreciation from the higher wages because so many are not working. It's really a difficult situation.
All right, Dan Celia of Financial Issues Stewardship Ministries, thank you so much for your time and being with us today. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Jenna. I appreciate being here.
And now back to the abortion case from the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court ruling today that the ban will stay in place, and also that abortion providers can challenge that law.
That is right. Well, with us back again is Kimberly Schwartz with Texas Right to Life, Director of Media and Communications. Kimberly, I think we've worked out some of our technical issues. Is the Supreme Court trying to play both sides with the decision they just rendered today?
Today's news is a bit of a mixed bag. We have victory overall in that the Heartbeat Act continues to stay in effect and save lives, and also the victory that the Biden administration's lawsuit against the Texas Heartbeat Act was dismissed. So we're very encouraged by that side of things, and we're alarmed that we're starting to go on the path of which the judiciary might try to block the Texas Heartbeat Act, but today's news is positive overall.
For now, the decision essentially kicks the challenge back to the lower courts. Do you think it'll end up back at the high court?
We'll have to see what the judiciary and how they interpret these new requirements from the Supreme Court. Part of our victory today that I didn't discuss earlier is that the abortion industry in their lawsuit was trying to sue a whole slew of people, anyone who could have been associated with the Texas Heartbeat Act. And the Supreme Court said, no, we're going to limit it to these few defendants. Now, those defendants, they're state health officials and agencies, are actually not in charge of enforcing the Texas Heartbeat Act. So it's possible that the lower court stays within its bounds of only ruling in regard to those few defendants, but then that's going to impact how the ruling might actually block or not block the Texas Heartbeat Act. So it is a little fuzzy going forward, and whether this ends up back at the high court is going to depend on how the lower court interprets this order from the Supreme Court and whether it stays within its bounds.
All right, Kimberly Schwartz, we are out of time, but thank you so much for joining us. Kimberly Schwartz with Texas Right to Life. And coming up, military service members pointing to religion to justify skirting vaccine mandates, why they're still in limbo.
Well, welcome back. Vaccination sites around the country are gearing up to administer COVID-19 booster shots to young teens after the CDC authorized the Pfizer vaccine booster shot for 16 and 17-year-olds. The move clears the way for 3 million American teens to get a third dose, and now the CDC is considering whether to expand boosters to even younger kids, as children now account for 22% of all new cases. Meanwhile, the Omicron variant continues to pop up across the country, now seen in at least 25 states.
A growing number of U.S. service members say the military is stripping them of their religious liberties.
And as the COVID-19 vaccination deadlines for active duty members have already passed, it's important to note not a single religious exemption has been granted. CBN National Security Correspondent Caitlin Burke has more.
Service members waiting on their religious exemption requests remain in limbo. While accustomed to following orders, those speaking with me say their faith won't allow them to comply with this one.
It goes against my bodily sovereignty as a Christian. I mean, God makes it very clear that for me, you know, this body that I'm given, this is my last bastion of freedom.
At the request of counsel, this service member asked not to be identified. He told CBN News that he received other vaccines from the military without doing much research. That wasn't the case when it came to the COVID-19 shot.
This is something that's supposed to be good for me, and yet I'm being punished if I do not take something that's good for me. When that was the case, when that happened, I began to question, why is this being forced so heavily on us?
In his exemption request, he cites fetal cell lines used in the research and development phase of the mRNA vaccines and in the production of Johnson & Johnson's shot. If his request isn't granted, he says he'll take a discharge before going against his beliefs. First Liberty Institute is representing a group of 35 Navy SEALs seeking an exemption with similar concerns. Attorney Mike Berry argues it's unconstitutional for their requests to be denied.
That's blatant discrimination. You can't treat religious beliefs less favorably than you treat medical conditions or administrative exemptions. Religious freedom in our country is protected by the First Amendment to the Constitution, and that doesn't change just because you serve in the military.
The National Faith Advisory Board, a group of more than 1,700 religious leaders organized by former President Donald Trump, is urging the Secretary of Defense to grant these religious accommodations, writing, quote, "Religious freedom is enshrined in our Constitution and must always be protected." Pentagon spokesman John Kirby tells CBN News religious exemptions are rare. For example, none has been granted in either the Navy or Marines in almost a decade.
It's not about liberties. It's about a military medical requirement to keep them safe, to keep their families safe, to keep their units safe. And the Secretary continues to strongly believe that these vaccines are the best way to do it with respect to COVID.
I heard back from a Navy spokesman who told me that there is no blanket policy about denying religious exemption requests. Each is considered on a case-by-case basis. There are, however, very strict guidelines that must be met, including a history of objecting to vaccination. Anyone who does object and refuses to comply with getting vaccinated, Christian or not, will be given a general discharge. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
All right, thank you, Caitlin. Joining us now, CBN medical reporter Lori Johnson. Lori, one of the main reasons for the religious exemptions to vaccine mandates is an objection over the use of fetal cell lines to develop the vaccine. Can you tell us more about these fetal cell lines that were used?
Right. So, John, we're talking about abortions, 1 or 2 abortions that occurred about 50 years ago. So 1 or 2 abortions 50 years ago. And believe it or not, these cells from these aborted babies have been able to reproduce in the lab over and over and over again all these years. So we're talking about cells that are literally thousands and thousands of generations removed from those initial abortions. So these cells were used to test the mRNA vaccines, the Pfizer and the Moderna, and then actually to make the J&J vaccine.
Lori, what about the production of other, major mandatory vaccines? Is this a similar issue with those?
Absolutely. So most of the other vaccines that so many of us have taken were used, were manufactured actually, like the J&J, using fetal cell lines. I'm talking about vaccines like the MMR, mumps, measles, and rubella, flu, shingles, smallpox, hepatitis, shingles, and more.
You know, I think times have changed. People perhaps have gotten those vaccines, but just weren't well aware of the fetal cell lines that were used like we are today. I do want to ask, Lori, though, is that any different from the fetal cell lines used to develop common over-the-counter drugs like Tylenol, Tums, or Benadryl?
They absolutely are, John. So most of the vaccines, the ones that I just mentioned, were made using fetal cell lines. So many medical products, even certain processed foods and beauty supplies have been tested using fetal cell lines. So that puts these things in the same category as the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines. So what am I talking? I'm talking about medical products like Tylenol, aspirin, Lipitor, Motrin, Zocor, Tylenol, cold and flu, Benadryl, Sudafed, albuterol, Preparation H, Claritin, Zoloft, Prilosec, azithromycin, Enbrel, and the list goes on and on. So things that we use every day, and this doesn't even begin to talk about some of the medications that we're given when we go to the hospital. Most all of them have been tested using fetal cell lines.
Lori, where are church leaders and pro-life groups on this? Do any of them think the protection given from these vaccines outweighs the moral issues behind their research and development?
Actually, Jenna, almost all of them do. Almost all leaders of the major religions, Christian and otherwise, Jewish and so forth, have come out in favor of the vaccines, as well as leaders of major ministries, including our own, Pat Robertson and Gordon Robertson, pro-vaccine, Franklin Graham, Robert Jeffress, T.D. Jakes. The list goes on, including the Pope and the Catholic Church. As a matter of fact, the Catholic Church and the Southern Baptist Ethics Commission came out with a statement saying receiving a vaccine is considered an act of loving thy neighbor, and go one step further and say it is our moral responsibility to get one for the common good.
All right, CBN medical reporter Lori Johnson learned a lot today. Thank you so much for your time. Have a great weekend.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Lori. And when we come back, Washington lionizes a World War II hero. The funeral of Senator Bob Dole. Tonight, the nation remembers longtime Kansas Senator, presidential candidate, and war hero Bob Dole. At the World War II Memorial today in Washington, officials and celebrities paused in a public ceremony honoring the Republican's life and service. This after President Biden's eulogy at the National Cathedral, remembering a veteran who served in Congress for 36 years.
We may follow his wisdom, I hope, and his timeless truth. But the truth of the matter is, as divided as we are, the only way forward for democracy is unity.
Yesterday, Dole lay in state at the U.S. Capitol Rotunda as leaders from both sides of the aisle joined President Biden in paying their respects. I believe that was the sound that you just heard. Yesterday, Dole, Dole's wife, Elizabeth, a former senator who served for the state of North Carolina in 3 presidential administrations, was seen embracing her husband's flag-draped coffin. Another funeral service is scheduled tomorrow in Kansas. Well, coming up, forget wild goose chase, try Camel on the run, and an incomplete nativity scene. We explain when Faith Nation returns.
And finally tonight, from the cop car to the golf cart, the high-speed camel chase in Kansas City took police and animal control all over the city.
You heard Jenna correctly. It was a camel, originally part of a live nativity display in Bonner Springs, Kansas, that sent police in an hours-long hot pursuit after the overnight escape. The furry fugitive took to the highway before detouring through golf courses and neighborhoods. After a full day of tailing the offender at speeds nearing 40 miles an hour, officers finally roped the camel in with a lasso, safely taking it into custody before returning the double-humped mammal back to its owners. Police chronicled the successful reunion on social media, saying it can now go back to doing whatever camels naturally do.
Yeah, back to the nativity scene.
I love it. All complete.
All right, thank you so much for joining us.
Have a great weekend.